Okay, thank you very much for the great introduction. And then I'm very grateful to the organizing committee, and it's very exciting and big pleasure to present and share my thoughts in this very meaningful first conference on the Korean wave. So let me just begin with the land acknowledgement. I would like to respectfully acknowledge that I am presenting from the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of Silix Okanagan people. Today, I'm going to talk about the K-pop and cultural hybridity of K-pop. However, let me just introduce my research a little bit, and then I'll just move on to today's topic. So I have researched K-pop and K-pop fans, especially K-pop fans in Canada and several different countries over the past almost 10 years now. So most recently, my research team conducted an interview-based study of K-pop fans in Peru, in Latin America. So some of the early findings of my recent study will be shared in my presentation today. Mostly through audience studies, I have learned how K-pop fans of different cultural background engage with K-pop as a foreign cultural form. So in particular, in the early periods of global circulation of K-pop, I have noticed that the different kind of fan groups responded differently. For example, I remember in the early period when I began to my project on K-pop fandom, so many fans actually were very shy and they didn't actually identify themselves as K-pop fans. It's something they have to hide, I guess. However, as interview went on, I often found out they are actually very enthusiastic fans. So I was able to see this kind of social construction of K-pop in North America, especially as something negative in the early period of this global expansion of K-pop. And also another very interesting point was when I interviewed white fans of K-pop, white young people of K-pop, some of them were really worried about their kind of how the other K-pop fans would think about them. So for example, some white fans worried about their kind of stereotyping of white fans fetishizing Asian culture and so on. But as time goes on, I have found some progress in this fan culture and fans kind of identity formation. So they are increasingly more positively think about themselves as K-pop fans. And when I interview them these days, they are more openly, share their thought and their feelings as K-pop fans. So it's I have witnessed some changes. And also my latest study in Peru, what is interesting was the mostly lower middle class and working class young people were much more enthusiastic about K-pop, while the upper middle class young people, some of them liked K-pop, but they didn't actually come out. So they didn't openly identify themselves with K-pop. So I feel that in Peru still there is some discrimination or negative social construction of K-pop. Let me just begin with what I'm going to talk about today. So I'm going to begin with what K-pop is. And I think the K-pop, the term is not the best term to kind of describe this cultural phenomenon or cultural genre. And then I'll talk about this specifically cultural hybridity of K-pop. So there are different discourses and theories about cultural hybridity of K-pop. So we are going to talk about it. And then the last part is then how the overseas global fans actually react or respond to these discourses of and actual cultural hybridity and those components of K-pop. So the definition of K-pop, of course, K-pop is a particular form of South Korean pop music. But for the past like 10 years, we have come across certain rhetorics or namings and discourses around K-pop. So especially in the 2000s and early periods of K-pop phenomenon, the K-pop industry was sometimes described as a factory-like system, as you see in this slide. So major U.S. newspapers and magazines use this this name or this phrase of factory girls or K-pop's Seoul is K-pop's factory and so on. The Western media's view on K-pop seems, of course, problematic as they imply the stereotypes and also disregard the complexity and dynamism of K-pop. When, for example, when the Korean female pop artists are called factory girls, as this John Seabrook's essay, when they are just reduced to factory girls, these artists, their agency and artistic power are largely ignored. And also, yes, their creativity is also reduced to this factory-like system or systematic reproduction. So without any aesthetic or creative energy. And another interesting example regarding the definition of K-pop is, as you see here, it's a New Yorker magazine. They released a video, very interesting video discussion video, inviting several experts and to talk about the reason behind the K-pop's global rise. And this magazine's the online discussion in one of the panelists was American music producer Jeff Raban. He actually argued, as you can see here, quote, in the US market, there are about 2 million Korean Americans who are people of Korean descent. Without question, BTS or large K-pop groups are going to be able to sell tickets in the New York City and certainly sell out in Madison Square Garden and can do well probably in the top 10 Korean American markets in the US. But beyond that, they can't, quote. So as you can see, this famous music producer, American music producer, actually see K-pop as a very ethnic diasporic music rather than music with potential to go to appeal to mainstream audience. So while many data shows that K-pop audiences are far more than Korean ethnic communities, some Western gatekeepers who consider the US as the center of the global music production, like Jeff Ravan, this music producer, the K-pop may still be considered something not normal or the music of low quality. Of course, the K-pop use primary primarily Korean language and sung by Korean performance, but it doesn't mean this music is ethnic music. It's certainly is now very global and very creative kind of musical trends. And so let me just move on to the second part, which is the more specifically what cultural hybridity is, and then how people talk about this cultural hybridity of K-pop. So K-pop is more than Korean pop music, of course, and then K-pop shows a high level of cultural hybridity, whereby its place of origin is intentionally obfuscated and then Western pop music styles are extensively reappropriated. So acknowledging K-pop's emulations and citations of other pop culture genre and styles, many critics have defined K-pop as a hybrid genre. And there are several very important work, including the article by Professor Ryung-jae. I believe he presented earlier today. But let me introduce two more recent monographs on Hallyu, where the Hallyu is characterized as very clearly hybrid cultural genre that result from the process of imitating or emulating Western, especially American pop music. These are two books, and the first one, by the book Soul in Soul by Crystal Anderson, explores Afro-American music's significance in the evolution of K-pop. So Crystal Anderson suggests that K-pop has evolved through a long and complex interaction with American culture. And she argues that K-pop presents high intertextuality through the emulation of American music genres such as R&B and hip-hop. So in doing so, the Anderson even defines K-pop as a subgenre of global hip-hop. So owing to the interaction and emulation, hybridity has been K-pop's most salient characteristic, Anderson argues. So secondly, the Kyung Kim's book, Hegemonic Mimicry, sees the Hallyu phenomenon as a result of Korea's mimicry of American pop culture and social system. According to this book, contemporary K-pop is creative mimicry of hegemonic American culture, and the recent global rise of K-pop means the emergence of alternative hegemony that replace or challenge the declining American dominance in the global cultural landscape. Thus, Kyung Kim calls Hallyu and K-pop hegemonic mimicry, meaning a cultural phenomenon which started as a mimicry but became hegemonic. Both Anderson and Kim, these two books, appreciate the role of hegemonic American pop culture in the evolution and development of K-pop and its industry. However, these two books seem to overly emphasize the Americanization of Korean pop culture as K-pop's driving force behind the K-pop's evolution. In my view, the emergence of global K-pop and Hallyu is too complex to be reduced to the process of the Americanization of local culture. Therefore, we should carefully consider the complex processes of hybridization observed in K-pop's evolution. So cultural hybridity refers to the fusion of relatively distinct forms, styles, and identity, as Mawan Crady defines. The K-pop industries have explicitly engaged with the fusion of different styles, partly in order to appeal to a wider audience. The K-pop industry's strategy of hybridization seems to have been successful, as shown by the recent global expansion of K-pop and its fandom. The extreme hybridization is something to distinguish actually K-pop from other Asian pop music. K-pop industry have been really eager to go abroad and go global from the since the especially 1990s. So empirical studies have revealed that the global fans tend to be appealed by hybrid forms of K-pop, which dilute the cultural and language barriers involved in K-pop as a cultural genre that originated in a distant location. As I'm going to also address in the second half of today's talk, this kind of the fans' reactions to cultural hybridity of K-pop has been consistently found in my study. In my early study in 2018, the Canadian fans, they talked about the K-pop's hybridity as a really beneficial factor so that they can easily familiarize themselves with K-pop. And then the similar comments were found in my recent study in Peru. So overall, K-pop's cultural hybridity is positively perceived by global fans and critics. We should be aware that cultural hybridity is more than simply a mixture of pre-existing cultures. To explore the ideological effects of cultural hybridity, we should consider power relations in the process of hybridization. In particular, we should ask several core questions, such as who hybridized what, and whose culture is hybridized, and what power relations are reproduced in the process of hybridization. So in fact, there are ongoing debates about the meanings and potential of hybrid culture aspect of K-pop's culture and industries. So among others, I would like to highlight three types of critical perspectives on K-pop's cultural hybridity. The first, the performance studies scholar Yoon claims that the association of K-pop with cultural hybridity may stereotype K-pop as a non-Western cultural genre from a Western perspective. So Yoon, the author, points out that referring K-pop as hybrid of East and West is problematic, because such a framework perceives K-pop as non-authentic or non-original hybrid. Or argues that hybridity is signified as the opposite of authenticity and originality in the dominant media. So K-pop is stereotyped as non-authentic imitation of original American pop music. The second critical perspective raised by some scholars questions the uniqueness of K-pop's hybrid text. They are focusing on textual characteristics of K-pop. According to them, these critics, K-pop does not show a creative synergy between the global and local, as K-pop largely adopts Western cultural conventions while removing the components of Koreanness. For example, in his analysis of K-pop's textural components, Jin asserted that K-pop is arguably another version of American pop music, because many K-pop musicians do not emphasize the locality and instead superficially mix in the US style and genres. So many critics actually talk about K-pop and call K-pop like music without actually Koreanness. In this regard, the K-pop's hybridity has been actually questioned. And the third, some political economy scholars have suggested that presented their skepticism about K-pop industry's counter-hegemonic potential. So critical media scholar Kyung harshly criticized K-pop industry's incorporation into global digital capitalism. According to Kim, the cute yet highly sexualized K-pop idols are cultural products that serve and reproduce the ideology of neoliberal global capitalism and Korea's traditional patriarchal system. So rather than being really counter-hegemonic. So Kim argues that K-pop has emulated American pop music, American pop music's conventions, and voluntarily been subsumed into American cultural hegemony rather than exploring critical agency to dialogically interact with or challenge the American pop music convention and industry. So that is for Kyung Kim, the K-pop's hybridity is not a creative transgression of existing systems, but rather a marriage between global capitalism and locally dominant ideology. He used the term double hybridized constraints, meaning the K-pop is kind of doubly constrained by simultaneously by neoliberal capitalism and local Confucian patriarchy and local ideology. So I would like to discuss a particular form of cultural fusion known as cultural appropriation. So cultural appropriation can be defined, quote, broadly as the use of cultural symbol, artifacts, genre, rituals, or technologies by a member of another culture, quote. The notion of cultural appropriation contributes to understanding how culture of other and the cultures of other are commodified, and what power relations are involved in cross-cultural media production and consumption. Especially the cultural appropriation is as a kind of cultural hybridization, but cultural appropriation involves the power relation between who appropriates what. So it's all very often address the appropriation by majority, appropriation of minority by majority. So K-pop's frequent taking and citation of Afro-American or Latin music tropes contribute to the genre's cultural hybridity. However, K-pop's citational practices may not necessarily be identical to the pattern of majority culture's appropriation of minority cultures, such as American culture's appropriation of Asian culture, as shown in mainstream Hollywood movies. While K-pop's overall frequent adoption of references from other cultural text and context tends to be defined as cultural hybridity and a main characteristics of the genre. Some specific cases of citational practices have been criticized for the problematic ways of cultural appropriation. For example, K-pop group Mamamoo used blackface at their concerts and was severely criticized for their out of context and very disrespectful adoption of Afro-American styles. And then they were really disappointed their fans. It was 2017. And another more recent example is another K-pop group, Blackpink. Their music video for the song How You Like That included a scene in which Hindi deity Ganesha was disrespectfully utilized as a prop, which made Hindi audience very uncomfortable. So they removed this Ganesha image, as you can see in the second screenshot, immediately after the complaint of many Hindi audiences. So the Mamamoo and the Blackpink's examples are very explicit, the cultural appropriations examples, I guess. But there are some more ambiguous ones, whether there are some debates about, for example, this Taeyang's appropriation of Black culture and blackness. So despite this Mamamoo and Blackpink examples of explicit and exploitative cultural appropriation of other cultures, K-pop citation of other cultures, as you see in this Taeyang's case here, tends to have more multiple meanings and more debates. So for example, regarding Taeyang, K-pop scholar Seokyeong Kim suggested that K-pop artist performance of blackness can be more than simple appropriation. So according to her claim, the K-pop's embodiment of blackness can offer creative space for reimagination of Koreanness and blackness at the same time. So let me talk about then how fans actually responded to this cultural hybridity and even cultural appropriation observed in many K-pop songs and their music videos. So my research team recently interviewed Peruvian fans. This is actually ongoing study since 2021. So to explore how Latin fans think about recent K-pop's use of Latin tropes. K-pop has really extensively used Afro-American tropes, but then increasingly use Latin tropes in many music videos and songs. So the participants in my study were asked what they thought about several exemplary K-pop songs and their music videos that explicitly incorporated Latin music tropes. For example, I've picked several Latin trope-influenced K-pop songs and their music videos, such as Twice's Alcohol Free, the 2021 song and music video that which actually musically include bossa nova acoustic guitar chorus. And its music video also presents so-called tropicalization of Latin culture, which means stereotyping of Latin culture through images of idyllic beaches, palm trees, and bikini-clad women. So for Peruvian fans in my study, the K-pop citation of Latin cultural components were positively perceived especially compared to other existing appropriative practices, such as American music industry's citation and uses of Latin music. For Latin fans in my study, the K-pop's citational practices were considered an intercultural and mutually beneficial process rather than one culture's exploitation of another. Although they see some stereotypical images of Latin culture in some Korean music videos, they tend to consider those presence of Latin culture in K-pop music video and K-pop songs in a positive manner. Interestingly, most interviewees in my study favorably evaluated the increasing presence of Latin tropes in K-pop. So they were excited actually to encounter Latin tropes in K-pop because the adoption practices for them, it actually means K-pop artists and K-pop industry's effort to reach out to Latin audiences. Many Latin audiences actually talked about how far they are from Korea, physically, but also symbolically. So, because the North America is considered as a center of K-pop, global K-pop fandom, so some fans talked about the Latin American fans actually they have very limited access to K-pop merchandise and K-pop, the information about K-pop. A Latin fan in my study said, quote, "It was exciting to see my favorite idol speak Spanish. So I think that Latin music styles being used in K-pop songs is cool and it shows their respect for Latin culture. It may be their way of responding to us," quote. According to the fans, Latin tropes in K-pop allowed Latin fans to easily sing along and access a cultural genre that originated in a distant context. So K-pop's citational practices were not unanimously endorsed, of course. So there are some fans, some doubt, and some criticism. For example, several fans expressed mixed feeling. So maintaining that there were recurring cases of wrongdoing that involved the exploitation of Latin tropes only to attract attention and to look good without a sincere effort to understand cultural context. For example, speaking of alcohol-free, this Twice music video and its inclusion of images of tropical beaches, cocktails, and other K-pop stereotypes of Latin culture and music. One of the interviewees stated, quote, "Some people might take it the wrong way, as in, oh, now they will see us that way. They might also think that Latinos are very hot, extroverted, and very direct, like kissing you on the cheek." However, most interviews did not consider these practices as cultural appropriation because these K-pop's citation practices did not aim to, according to them, did not aim to steal something as their own without giving credit. Instead, for the fans, the Latin fans, the alcohol-free is an example of cultural appreciation, which implies intercultural exchange rather than cultural appropriation that intends to steal and own Latin culture. for commercial purposes. So of course, this boundary between cultural appreciation and cultural appropriation is kind of symbolic and arbitrary. So there's no very clear definition of cultural appropriation and cultural appreciation. However, interestingly, some fans consider this citational K-pop citational practices as kind of the practice of appreciating Latin culture. So most interviewees shared the view that K-pop's citation practices are not exploitative appropriation, but rather cultural appropriation. So it was kind of, according to them, kind of soft version of appropriation. So for the Latin fans, K-pop was considered an alternative cultural form that did not necessarily threaten the Latin culture and identity. So in comparison, as the US media has been influential on Latin media environments and audiences, the US media's influences was considered to be more extensive and hegemonic. So interestingly, they thought the US industry's use of Latin tropes as very offensive and exploitative kind of practice of cultural appropriation. However, they think differently about K-pop's use and citation of Latin trope. So let me just wrap up my talk. So K-pop's hybridity involves citation of and fusion with other cultural forms. The hybrid nature of K-pop has been positively or negatively evaluated by critics and scholars. Some critics celebrate the creative space created by various cultural citations, while others lament that locality is subsumed in highly commodified global culture. So as presented in the second half of today's talk, the global fans perceive the cultural hybridity of K-pop in their own ways. According to my recent studies of Latin K-pop fans in Peru, K-pop's citational practices were not necessarily appropriation, but rather appreciation or effort to reach out to their Latin fans. For the fans, the cultural hybridity and citations of other culture observed in K-pop offer versatile entry points for them to easily engage with the cultural genre of K-pop. The K-pop as a new cultural content became an alternative yet intimate cultural resource, especially compared to hegemonic American pop music. Yeah, that's it for today. So I would be very happy to respond to your questions. Thank you.